All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining, and welcome to the Data Economics Festival hosted by the Data Economics Company. My name is SIRTAJ, BRAR, and we're about to kick off a session titled Sustainable Building, Using Data to Create Incentives for More Sustainable Building at the Homeowner Level. If you're joining us for the first time, you can learn more by going to lydion.com/festival. That's lydion.com/festival, where you can find content related to some 20+ panels and sessions on how digital data and economics intersect. For those of you who are watching the session live, I encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A button. There's also a chat window. I'll be looking out for both of those things. Today is the last day of the festival, but we're kicking off with one of the panels that I've actually been most excited about. And so let me get started by introducing the team from Building Change. And maybe I can ask each of you guys to introduce yourselves. So Victoria, would you like to go first?
Okay, well, I'm Victoria KING-KONDOS. I am an audiovisual producer turned educator turned behavioral scientist. And I got excited about Building Change when I first met Jason virtually, and he was sharing his ideas about how the concept of circular economies could help homeowners actually live better and help contractors also have more livelihood. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. James, how about yourself?
Sure. I'm James. I'm a problem solver at my core, and I've been blessed to be able to help solve problems across a lot of sectors. I spent a lot of time working in the nonprofit sector, education, as well as in some creative sectors, including dance, as well as some of the visual and performing arts. What we do here at Building Change really is revolutionary. There's nowhere else in the world where you can find an organization that has conceptualized a way to monetize the data associated with your home and its occupants in a way which really benefits a social bottom line. So I'm excited to talk about what we do and how it's going to help change the world.
Awesome. And Jason, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, SIRTAJ. Jason DISPENZA. I'm an energy efficiency engineer for 16 years. My experiences with mostly Energy Star and home performance programs, both regionally in the Mid-Atlantic and nationwide. All that time spent as a contractor or program implementer gave us a lot of visibility to the homeowner needs, in addition to the contractor needs, in addition to some of the policy and economic needs. And through that career, I was also juxtaposed next to the solar industry, my first company, and for 9 years we've had a company that was doing solar and efficiency, and it's like Mars and the Moon, Venus and Mars, like they are opposite in every way, divided industries, even though everyone ends up in housing. And even in efficiency, there's sort of the existing home group and the new home group equally divided. They don't really know much about what the other sides do, but still the homeowner is there, and still all this data, is very similar in homes. And then there's this economic impact imperative, if you will, digital data and economics, while we're here in this festival, and sort of what, for the last few years, we've been trying to evangelize with co-creators like Victoria and James is understanding that the solar industry has certificates and renewable energy credits that help get capital creatively structuring around solar projects. But in the home improvement space, or in the new construction space, where efficiency and health improvement projects are done usually together, there's no corollary, and there's actually a lack of understanding just about what certificates are in the housing sector or in the Energy Star and home performance sectors. And not even knowing what certificates are is part of our advocacy and educational piece, vis-a-vis trying to facilitate them to become real. And we see that we would enable vast new swaths of data companies that are out there that want to move and propagate data in new ways. And we're trying to defend the line for homeowners in terms of privacy, and in terms of kind of creating a marketplace that's safe for them to make their data private and elect to share it or not. And if they did, to make sure every company that would then come after that point is following a set of rules that is very homeowner focused. We serve a lot of grandma homes. We frequently use grandma as our example user who doesn't know anything about the internet, doesn't know much about the policy behind these programs, but knows what's good for her, knows how rebates work, that her house is an important thing to be worked on, and also knows that it is expensive to work on your house, right? And if you own a house, one thing breaks, $1,000 gone. One thing breaks, $8,000 gone. I mean, they are big ticket hits to the pocketbook. And in the solar industry, renewable energy assets, they can be built for you. Someone else is willing to pay for them and install them at your house because they own stuff about it. They own rights or attributes, or they've got you into some sort of new type of payback deal. And so we focus a lot on grandma, just like, we're all homeowners for the most part, or renters, and there's sort of something in this for every occupant in a domicile, to be honest with you. So it's about our health. It's about the performance of the environment around you and your family as a growing entity, or a spiritual entity, in addition to trying to create a method where contractors don't have to sell work anymore. And that's the same thing as saying that homeowners don't have to pay for work anymore, or at least pay for less, because their cost share is brought down through corporate sponsorship or corporate credit making, or new policy vehicles that sort of fall into these types of categories. We'll go deeper on that. Anyway, that was a long introduction for myself, but it's all about this interest and trying to change the nature of capitalism in such that this can be made very profitable for corporations, that cleaning up big things can be profitable, and we need to use new data techniques to make sure that homeowners are protected. And so it's connecting some dots that haven't been connected before, and connecting what we would like to call a mega market between stakeholder groups that have traditionally been independent, but we're going to show how easy these things can cohabitate and exist together. Like, how does healthcare play well with home performance industry or contract and construction industry vis-a-vis big data companies, or NGOs, nonprofits, utility companies, manufacturers, and so forth, that are usually trying to sell you something versus trying to bring you money for something. So anyway, we'll rehash that too, but thanks for the extended introduction. Victoria's going to run through our deck, a little quick presentation we put together for you.
Yeah, let me bring that up. Just give me 1 second here.
Dun, 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 dun.
All right, can you guys see it?
Yes, thank you.
All right, perfect.
All right, so building change is who we are, and what we're trying to do is cultivating a building performance mega market with Wayfinder. We'll talk a little bit more in the deck about what Wayfinder is. Next slide. So Wayfinder empowers consumers and businesses. This is what Jason was speaking about in his introduction, that this will be a new citizen permissioned marketplace where the residential and commercial building data is protected and monetized, but Wayfinder will not be controlling or the data. The property owners and the occupants will. That's the important thing. Individual consumers and trades benefit rather than personal information being the product. Building data is the product, and it's the property of the owners and residents. They get to sell it. Their data is their intellectual property, so they get to decide with whom and for how long they're willing to share it as an exchange. This is an important concept that we want to underline, that there will be like a limit to how long people can access the data, or entities can access the data. New revenue opportunities generated for home improvement businesses. Just a moment, let me move this thingy out of the way. It's bothering me. Okay. So that businesses themselves will be motivated to collect and manage data more effectively, that will impact the accessibility and quality of data, so that through Wayfinder over time, the value of that data will be increased. And this is kind of a tagline.
If I could jump in, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so I mean, as you look at all this, what Wayfinder does at its core is that it takes the home and it turns it into an income producing asset for consumers, and it takes the business, basically the built environment. It takes that data, it runs it through the Wayfinder ecosystem, and it makes money for the occupants and the owners. And it does so in a way where all that data is protected and the owners own that data. So Victoria is really driving down that point for us. And as Jason alluded to, like without Wayfinder, there's currently no way to get all this data put together and monetize, but there's value in that. So please continue, Victoria.
All
right.
I'll add one more thing to interject there.
Mhm.
And that also, Wayfinder is not trying to collect or aggregate the data. We're trying to create data standards that help those that have it now fit it together correctly. In addition to fitting it correctly together and indexing it where it is, we're trying to help them with standards, break it down into its minutia, tiny parts. So that if you're trading a water gallon that's coming out of your dishwasher, its arc and who gets to see it and who pays you for it is very individualized. It is very segregated from the massive amount of data that your home is. James is saying your home should be an income producing asset. That is, you know, everything bundled together. But Wayfinder, we're trying to produce a data standard that will enable ecosystems of companies to make this happen. And the punchline for homeowners is you might be able to measure the square footage of your house and the number of dollars per year your house generates for you once this was up and running and at scale. But we're here about advocacy and privacy rights and trying to maintain some level of backbone for credits and be a registrar for credits when that's necessary, so that the players and the aggregators and the financial institutions are all in sync and on the same page in terms of consumer privacy and this idea that homeowners are propagating and deciding how to control their data. And I think that's pretty, you know, kind of important concept for who we are. We're here to enable and facilitate and then, you know, foster the growth, but not necessarily be some sort of big data company. We are a protocol and want to make that clear. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, you want to go to the next slide, SIRTAJ? Okay, so Wayfinder core principles, as Jason was saying, that the primary impetus for creating this ecosystem is data privacy and control. We want property owners, renters, occupants, whether it's a commercial structure eventually or a private home, to be able to control their building performance and operational data that's related to their property. And they, as we said before, will decide who, when, what is shared and who gets to access for how long. Wayfinder is a public good. We want this to be something that is not owned or controlled by one entity. It should be looking at circular ecosystem focused on global sustainability and level market competition. This should be a consensus of individuals, organizations, all working together. Transparent representative governance. This is a big thing. This is our consensus-driven rule set, which will allow for transparency, which will keep integrity in this this ecosystem, and also make sure that there is this interoperability, because this is the big key, is getting all this data that already exists out there in the world so that it can communicate, it can be brought together and used effectively and efficiently. So human value, Wayfinder is created with the value of the individual human in mind, particularly workers. People who work in trades are hugely important. You were mentioning farmers, SIRTAJ, and that's another group that's very important. But workers are people that are the backbone of this country and every country. It's essential that they have a way of improving what they do and how they are compensated for what they do. So we say here, you know, while automation, machine learning, new technologies are the key to reaching global sustainability, all of these things need to be acted on by qualified humans. So this is the human is the core of Wayfinder, and creating more livable and sustainable environments, built environments. And that brings us to sustainability. Wayfinder will promote, facilitate, incentivize, and verify activities procured in the pursuit of prolonged, balanced, and happy livability for humans and all other organisms on planet Earth, because we have a responsibility to everything in our ecosystem, not just us. Humans tend to be a little bit egocentric sometimes, so just a little bit. So through these activities, Wayfinder will become a tool for reaching and demonstrating compliance with environmental, social, and governance principles established by businesses, organizations, and agencies. Anything to chime in there, gentlemen?
Yeah. The cool thing about Wayfinder, once we've really have our prototype and our principles and the way we keep data secure refined, is that it kind of really plays into principles of human nature. We talked about egocentrism and being a human being. Well, what Wayfinder does is that it takes entities that have certain financial interest in what Wayfinder does, such as finding a way to get data, monetize, facilitating privacy and control, addressing outputs and outcomes that evaluate and uplift human values and the humanistic approach to things in terms of how we all live and share this planet. So Wayfinder makes it easy for entities who do that type of stuff, but they do so within a profit-driven model. Right now, when organizations try and go about this, it's usually either organizations that don't have a lot of money and they come from the heart, like the nonprofits and someone like the grandmas of the world and little old church ladies and things like that. Or it comes from corporate America, where they're doing it as part of an approach of corporate sustainability or things like that. And it may or may not be about advancing their brand. But in the end, what Wayfinder does, it lets entities do what they do, and it makes it easy for entities doing what they do to get money into the segment of society where these values can be addressed, where sustainability can be facilitated. So all in all, Wayfinder is a facilitator, a conduit, and it kind of represents what we do as building change. We convene people. Please, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd continue that point to say that the house is a common denominator for all of us. You know, politics and viewpoints aside, we all live somewhere, right? And that house, you know, constrains you or grows you from your vantage point there. The ability to get all of these, you know, corporate initiatives, you know, distributed into housing versus doing mega projects was part of the genesis for you know, why I started the nonprofit 7 years ago, because capital was always excited to go to corporate America and say, we'll build you a $400 million solar farm over there, but they weren't willing to do it across 10,000 homes. And similar for water projects, you know, similar for you know, public healthcare and so forth, these spaces. So the home is sort of the final frontier of where you are all the time now, especially in today's society, let alone sort of how much time you spend sleeping near things or living near things or educating your children near things. So there's the softer side of how you live in the house vis-a-vis the hard economic side of how you live in the house. So on the efficiency front, there's all kinds of things we know how to do, but on the comfortability front, you know, those things dovetail with that. On the health improvement side of what goes into housing, there are, you know, very obvious things like, is your railing in your grandma's house loose or not, right? Like in a lot of these low income and weatherization programs across the US, those things are found and fixed all the time. However, energy efficiency resource money pays to resecure a loose railing or install one where one should be that doesn't even exist. And then you have to ask your question from a program manager's perspective, like, should the energy efficiency money portfolio have been the one that paid for that railing? And this is just one example out of many, but this is where we're saying as change makers and Wayfinder, that homeowner has a fact about her house. She was in a state where she had no railing, and then she finished up in a state where she did have a railing. And that could be a tradable credit. That could be, monetized. I don't usually like that word, but that could get her money from the right place that would actually benefit from her having a railing, aka her health insurer or her local hospital network, or crowds of folks that are philanthropically designed to help aging in place population without any expectation of financial return. So there's lots of fun derivatives that we could go on, and we have some videos and content on our website that goes into specific ideas and use cases, and that's in one example there. I would also, maybe make one more note back on the tradesperson and the energy worker as another great common denominator. It's something that exists as an equalizing force beyond the Energy Star with Homes program as we know it, and the existing programs for existing homes rather, and the new homes programs. They're segmented. New construction builders and subcontractors that service new construction are a completely different network than those that have licensure in the retrofit markets and the subcontractors to support them. And then, of course, you've got electrical tradesmen versus plumbing tradesmen versus HVAC tradesmen versus general construction folks. And the tradesperson at large is someone who is in some level of building code consensus. They're in some level of energy worker credential consensus that is common underneath these fragmented programs. We also see that there's over 70 different sponsors of Energy Star rebate programs in the US right now, and they only cover 30 out of 50 states. So 40% of states don't have a program, and of the 30 states that do, 70 sponsors exist. So if you're a worker, your life's kind of tough. You have many places to report data. You may have a skill set that's only sort of one element of a multi-element project. And then you've got homeowners who need to do many things at once in order to actually make an impact in their house. If that's a comfortability, or if that's an efficiency, or if that's a safety thing, it's not just one trade sometimes that has to come through and help you. So kind of coming back to what's in it for everyone, the homeowner should get larger, more impactful projects done for cheaper, because she chooses whether she wants to release attributes about herself, facts about herself or not. She would own this. And in the old model of big data, we're, as citizens, we're not used to owning our data. This is part of what's so new, with this data economics festival, big data versus economics, digital data versus economics. We're, as citizens, we're not used to owning data that makes us money. Some of us may own a Bitcoin bit here or there. Some of us may own a car, right? Some assets depreciate, some assets appreciate. Most of us own houses or live in houses, and that's usually the biggest investment of our lives, but it's also one of the hardest ones to fix correctly. And that's changing now, because data standards and compliance with building codes and a lot of this is advancing quickly. We're trying to say that the financial sector or the digital decentralized finance sector can help it get money and or finance itself more cheaply, and thus drive projects farther and easier and more abundantly than ever happened before. And one final quick note, kind of buried in some of this level, buried in the details here, is a level of retention for workers. And I mentioned the fragmentation of the Energy Star networks. When a program is stood up by the local agencies and funded by efficiency money alone, it trains a bunch of contractors, and then it runs for a year or two. And if it runs out of money, the rebate support network fails, the marketing to local homeowners fails, the contractors that it trains can go out of business. And that's happened more than we care to actually discuss on this call. But it happens frequently, and and it's been sort of the standard operating procedure for 10 years. So right now the market and the network is healthier than ever, but it still is sort of remained fragmented, isolated. National rebates aren't very easy to roll out for big corporate America due to this fragmentation. And trying to come back to my original diversion point with the tradesmen, that buried in some of this detail is a way to give them credit for the good work they do in their career. And, you know, I will use an allegory. You know, we all have a cell phone bill and or utility bill. And if you look at the last page of your cell phone bill, you see a fee and surcharge list that's what, 20 items long, you know, like 1 penny to 10 pennies are going to 30 different places. And we all just take that for granted. And so what I'm saying is what if tradespeople who do quality work in your house on items that are an appreciating asset for you, or that when Victoria said your data and its lease to an entity has to be able to stop. Like if you sell 3 years of credits for something, what happens in 3 years? You should be able to sell it again. But what this means is that if someone built something for you, if someone identified data for you, if someone validated or verified data for you, that the fee and surcharge methodology might be able to say, well, when you do resell your data later, you're reselling data that has some fingerprints on quality, you know, workers or credentialed workers. And they could be part of the fee and surcharge network, in addition to who stores the data and who routes your requests and who collects the funds and who moves the funds to wallets and accounts that pay you or pay contractors to do work and so forth. But suddenly the worker has a seat at that table, and they can get a pension just because, or a pension accumulated because their life career of work has been put through such a system. In addition to the end game being that the homeowner gets the bulk of the profit. Right now, we're used to a situation with our data where no one thinks it's ours, and thus we don't get to expect profit from it. And there's a difference between someone else owning it and giving you a percentage point for your data versus you owning it and giving someone else a percentage point for their data. Would you rather have 99% of it, or would you rather have 1% of it? And so that's also the core of what Wayfinder is, and really one of the first guiding principles as far as participation for companies in the network. They have to accept this new paradigm. And if they do, they can make tons and loads of money by helping you broker your data, but it's your data to broker. Mm-hmm. I'll leave it there and let us get to the next slide. Thank you, guys.
Okay. So here we have this sort of illustrates some of the things that Jason was speaking to just now, because this is an example, for instance, of what a Wayfinder homeowner dashboard might look like, and a variety of the types of asset classes. So you've got energy credits, you've got healthcare, research, safety. There are so many different stakeholders that could benefit from access to quality built environmental data. And these things all contribute to the health of communities as financial entities, but also as groups of humans living in a common space. So I don't know if you want to connect this, Jason, to what you were saying is sort of an illustration so people can wrap their head around it maybe a little better.
Yeah, I'll try and make this simple. I mean, just imagine any mega company that, that dominates its industry in one of these categories, right? Who's a huge healthcare insurer, who is a huge, consumer of fresh water. And not everyone knows who consumes the most fresh water. Big data companies are some of the biggest freshwater consumers vis-a-vis others. How does waste get, made profitable? So this is just a quick idea, dashboard of ideas of what we want to help viewers connect the dots, is to say, imagine these as classes and imagine the types of companies that already dominate those industries. And what we're saying is that they all have to be able to pivot at the same time through very little human, time and effort. They have to pivot their intention through a project. and an energy auditor and a construction person and a quality control inspector are there to say, yes, we got the data you need to underwrite all this. And then yes, enough work happened in the house to prove all of this. And the homeowner says, yes, I got paid all the money for the credits and so forth. But this has to be made easy. This has to let many funders in many classes of categories all pivot into one thing, into a project that starts and ends without a whole lot of worry about how the system works. It has to sort of pivot through the known methods and data layers, if you will, or the quality assurance provider layers that the Energy Star network already uses, and including using the data standards that it already uses. So I think we've got a method of how this becomes easy, and it's, you know, if you look at it from the many to one vis-a-vis the homeowner's side out, which is, I just want tens of thousands of dollars in front of doing tens of thousands of dollars of work. If I don't have to borrow $20,000 to do your $20,000 work scope, and instead I've sold my data rights, or instead I've sold my credits from this work scope you put together for me, you're in a new paradigm. So this dashboard is to show the breadth of what financial interests exist at corporate America that, if stranded or if broken into tiny little bits, could end up financing your project. And that means they would give you money for your credits and attributes based on what you do, or they might give you money for your attention or your time or to advertise to you, but you would choose all of this. But it would mean you wouldn't have to borrow money or use your savings to do a home improvement project. And I think that's the most critical thing, is bringing down the cost share for what homeowners do, especially when it has some level of public impact. If you're improving your family's healthcare, you're, by a token, amount, improving the public healthcare. If you're saving water at home, you're saving water for the country, right? Like, but this is how tiny things happen in housing makes big impacts. You have to be able to accumulate the tiny things for those who need to have big amounts of offsets. And that's why this whole thing exists, is to make that happen, and to do it in a way that is homeowner centric, or data owner, homeowner, citizen centric.
Cool. All right, SIRTAJ, you want to go to the next slide? So this is kind of an example of how the flow of data and the flow of funds could work. It's kind of crazy, but you'll find, like, right in the center is the Wayfinder registry. And, you know, this is an example. This isn't everything, but this is a kind of a glimpse into what this universe might look like. So there's, over on the left-hand side, you see things like UBID, BPI, and ResNet. These are things that are related to the home performance industry. UB is unique building identifier, because every home actually has its own identity, just like we do. And that's something that can be tracked. That's something, if a property owner has become a participant in the system, that may over time actually improve the value of their property itself. If they can turn around and say, look, this residence actually earns its keep, in a sense, by sharing the data that's produced, that's a huge benefit for the homeowner. It also can help stimulate local real estate. It can raise property values in areas where housing stock is aging. That's one of the big things, where building change got started, is facilitating grant programs in the Maryland area, where aging in place seniors can get funding for vital improvements in their homes. And building on that is bringing in all these other types of data classes that could be of interest to people who are willing to pay for it. Would you like to go into more detail about this, Jason?
Not really. I mean, this is both a new slide for us and already an old slide for us. And you can check out our website for fresher content in terms of how a registry is important for credit types, just like in the renewable certificate world for SREX or WREX and elsewhere for carbon REX, that a registry is there to facilitate a circular economy around those certificates. We are trying to propose such a thing for the odds and ends, mostly the non-energy benefits side of all of these known standards. So I mean, we're trying to accumulate all the known standards. This really isn't our stuff. This is us working on the shoulders of many other very advanced things and trying to bring them all together. And then also give them the backstop they need to have some circular economies nested on top of themselves for the stuff we showed you on the prior screen. So credits that exist in all those different categories on the prior screen, which is very complex in some way and very simple in some other ways. I mean, using the slip and fall accident component, there's a field or two that you would look for in a huge data file that shows that it was not installed right before, and then a few weeks later someone else reruns the file and shows that it is installed right then. We are essentially listening to those two fields to say, hey, before it was bad, before and now after it's good. And that's sort of what the mapping is. That's a lot of what we've had to do for all these known data standards to sort of connect them to this multi-purposable financial network and encouraging financial partners to come in here to collect funds from big companies and put them into escrow so that they're there and ready for projects across the nation to say, hey, I have a loose railing in my project, and I claim a couple $100 from you to install a new one, and so forth. So those financial companies collecting money for sort of socially combined interest is one part, and then how that maps through all the known data standards is what we've tried to give everyone. And that's what Wayfinder is basically this gift of trying to make the mappings easy on an idea by idea basis. But yeah, this is a tough diagram to squint at. And we actually have some videos and some newer diagrams coming out with some of our white papers that break this into a few different pieces. But
I see we have a question, Jason. Someone has asked, Kyle has asked, how will these homeowners physically acquire and license their data?
So the initial idea is that it would be deployable through the known home performance with Energy Star networks. And before you do an energy audit for a homeowner, sometimes you have them sign a form to collect data, and that's what is useful for local rebates and local grants for low income types of programs already. That's standard procedure. Now imagine you might sign a second form or a third form or a fifth form or maybe one form that sort of shows all these additional data sets that might need to be collected that would drive some of these new types of rebates. For instance, we don't typically collect who your healthcare insurance provider is when we do an energy audit. But if that is something you elect to give, then it can be collected during an energy audit. And then the point is how do you sort of register this information? The idea is that it would work very similarly to how we register rights for homeowners in the solar industry. So you're about to do a project, you pre-register. You finish a project, you finish registering, and the data is collected on behalf of a homeowner, but it has to be registered in order for companies to either request access to it or to move money on behalf of the deal itself. If your deal contains a bunch of rebates in it, it's going to have a reference point and just instructions on who to pay and for what. And so all of that is part of the back end and what all the governance entities that make up the Wayfinder ecosystem do together collectively and ideally real time once this is at scale. So I don't think I quite answered the question, but I think that from the homeowner's perspective, it would say, well, yes, you're collecting some data, now collect some more data and I'll sign your form. And yeah, the expectation is that you have it, you're going to structure and organize it, and you're going to send it to me and I'm going to register it, or you're going to register it on my behalf and I'm going to have an account to log into to do stuff with it.
Yeah, if I could add a little bit more to that. So as Jason said at the onset, we're going to initially begin by leveraging the impact of the home performance within Energy Star, that process, the whole building audit. So yes, but I would take it a step further too. We're still, thinking about some of the best ways to make this happen. So we are going to leverage other aspects of other sectors and how they approach things. There might be some opportunities there. Like for example, is the building audit the best place to collect health data? It probably isn't. If human psychology is in the indicator of anything. However, doing so within the context of a healthcare provider initiative, or maybe something that's facilitated by way of trusted community partners, that might be a way of going about it as well. And then finally, and this is probably where some of the more economic oriented things will come into play. Some of it might be a self-report to a certain degree, because it may not require the degree of validation as something else might be. And when you have this interface that we're creating, like the dashboard, like you saw on the prior slide, that's going to be very, very highly coveted space for consumers' attention. And some advertisers may want to have their branding and stuff put there. So in essence, we're going to leverage existing networks as well as perhaps get the consumer involved too. But in the end, as it gets put together, it all will be secure, it all will be verified, and it all can be monetized in the appropriate way to the appropriate sort of class, asset class.
Cool. So gentlemen, are you guys able to see the Q&A? There are 3 questions that are kind of—
Why don't we try and finish our last slide or two
building
real quick, and yeah, we'll do the last, throw all the questions at the end if we can.
Okay, cool. All right. So
Yeah.
this is just an example of what the registry and escrow ledger might look like. This is more sort of data centric. You'll see where it says payment for data. On the previous slide, the acronym PFD was meaning payments for data. The types of entities that would be willing to purchase homeowner data. And then you want to talk to this, Jason? This might be a little more—
I don't think we have time to fully unpack some of this.
Yeah, we're running a little over. So you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, SIRTAJ? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So unique building identification, that's that UBID, as we mentioned before, which specifies the particular residence or structure. Let's see, move this over again because it's blocking my view. Okay, so municipalities, regional and state governments, utilities, and others have public policy, marketing, or operational efficiency motivations to have all homes automatically modeled by cloud-based computing. Zero Home is an example of this approach, so that they're using available information to get a high-level home performance characterization of any given structure. This is part of how the data the home produces will be managed and its quality verified. Automated modeling generates thousands of HP XML files. That's the home performance protocol, containing publicly available information. Each file can serve as the beginning of the property's electronic building record. So, as we mentioned before, over the lifespan of a residence, all of this information that it produces and that's gathered about it can actually play a role in the value of that property. These initial data can help funders learn where opportunities broadly exist to support sustainability and public well-being. So when you have the profiles that are existing for homes in a given area, in a particular neighborhood that may need development. The homes may be aging, and that impacts the health, that impacts the quality of life. This is a way that entities that want to invest in these things, because it supports their, for instance, their corporate social responsibility model and mission, can target not just in individual homes, but individual aspects of what those homes need to fund.
Yeah, I'd like to interject on this one. So, what's on this slide is really what's already happening. We're saying that what's already happening could, perhaps get some parts of the profile that might exist in our ecosystem a little further along without anyone having to do double duty data stuff. But these are examples of the old guard, the old way, the old decade of thinking where we can, the big data space companies can figure something out about you and know that your fridge is obsolete, or they can fly an infrared camera over your neighborhood and see that your attic is too hot or too cold. Like we already have entities that know this stuff about you and are really only care to advertise to you. And what we're trying to say is, let's flip that entire discussion. Let's flip it so that you can sell your improvement. You can sell the hassle to improve. You can sell attributes about a better or smarter improvement to help pay for the improvement. So it's about your house. Yes, your house is going to outlive you, maybe. The average age or the average duration of a home is 200 years for appraised value when it's built. And then also builders build houses and they sell them immediately to somebody. The average tenure in a house is about 7 years for any one family. So what you do to improve your house either pays you back in that time frame, or it pays back all the future owners over the lifetime of the house. So there's some reason to sort of have some of this attached to you and some of this attached to the home, as far as what's making the money. Is it your house that you own, so it's passing it up? Vis-a-vis some part of your behavior that you're getting paid for right now in the moment. And at the end of the day, there's a few tools that aren't even on here yet, but we all know Zillow and Redfin and these sort of public apps that you can search MLS data. And MLS is a multiple listing service that real estate agents use nationwide. And there's 500 different MLSs for 50 states of real estate. No one even knows that. It's so weird, in fact, to realize that. But Zillow and a few others just started pulling data from all 500 of them. And as some of these already existing programs, they're figuring out what your house's age and state of obsolescence is in every regard. And they're trying to do automated scores. They're basically trying to get a score for your house into MLS. What we're saying is flip the narrative again. We're saying, why don't you get paid to improve your house and then send something through MLS and then send something through to Zillow that basically says the dollars per square foot of my house of income is $1 per square foot. I'm earning $3,000 a year with the data that this house's improvement package generated. And the first 3 years are encumbered, and then in year 4 I can sell it again, and in year 6 I can sell it again, and so forth and so forth. But that's the nature of RECs. That's the nature of certificates and how they work in the solar industry. So if you don't know what those are, and in the home performance sector, we're trying to bring the imagination around what the solar industry has that we don't. And we have so much more, because we don't have one REC type in our housing. We have dozens. We have many different types of attributes for many different things. But anyway, let's keep going with the slides, and
Okay.
we'll go from there.
Excuse me. So for funders, motivation, standardization in contracts, industry standards and protocols, financing, insurance, and workforce credentialing facilitates streamlined braiding of funding sources. So this again comes back to creating the rule set that will allow all of these different entities to communicate with each other effectively and thus be able to evaluate data effectively. So we need to develop partnerships with aggregators that will help with identification, measurement, and verification of data, identify and pay for data sources and techniques that support operational efficiency, and identify and pay for data documenting claimable attributes from homes and buildings. Things that are important to people, to organizations, to companies that have value that is currently not being taken advantage of. So you want to go to the next slide? So this is an example of just some of the organizations that we have been communicating with and who form our advisory committee. There's a lot of thought leadership in these various organizations that has been helpful in our growth trajectory, and we're still looking for other collaborators that can help realize this. And the final slide is simply some of the names and some of the individuals that we have been specifically communicating with. So I think we can go ahead and go to questions now, Jason, or unless there's something else that you want to add, Jason or James.
I think we can go into the questions because I think there's a few things that we didn't cover that we can't cover because of time, but some of the questions reflect it. So I can talk initially about some of the funding of the incentives, and Jason, you can wrap up my thought. But in essence, it's going to be funding that comes from a diverse set of stakeholders who have an interest in the type of data that's represented by the home, by the built environment. And it could be, for example, a company like Home Depot that cares about the quality of the refrigeration units in low-income communities. It could be Coca-Cola that wants to put a beautiful mural on the wall of every low-income home. It could be a philanthropic organization that has $500,000 to replace railways, rails in terms of aging in place and things like that. So the point being is that there are entities out there that spend their money. The advertising sector is an interesting one, and the for-profit sector, because not only do you have these corporate entities that spend money in the community to address corporate social responsibility goals and objectives, but they also spend advertising. And so from a corporate perspective, it could make sense to take some of your advertising dollars, instead of just putting it in the Super Bowl, which is probably a good idea if you can afford it, but taking some of your advertising dollars and maybe putting it into Wayfinder. And instead of like advertising on a billboard, you might have your logo on a hot water heater, on an HVAC system and things like that. So in essence, we're going to take funding from a wide range of sources, as I said earlier, sources that are in essence spent because of the needs of that industry. So an advertiser is going to be advertising. A grant maker is going to be making a grant. And Wayfinder facilitates the aggregation of those funding sources into what we're calling currently payments for data.
I'd like to ask a follow-on question.
I'd add to that to say, we try and talk about the concepts frequently enough. And so, James said we would take this, right? It's more that we want you to take this, right? Like we're saying that Wayfinder can provide this mesh of a data standard, basically, that allows a Coca-Cola logo to go through places and end up on your water heater, and you receive money from them coming through various financial players. And that's just one thing out of a 400-line work scope or a 40-line work scope. Wayfinder's helping just those folks and entities make those connections. So there's really nothing pivoting through us. And we do want data companies. We do want financial companies. We need financial aggregators to sort of prove some of the initial ideas, like the stickers on in NASCAR sponsoring, of your HVAC system type of thing. And then James also mentioned a handful of advertising driven use cases, sort of one at a time by company. And, I might sort of invert that. I mean, like, you might just focus on Coca-Cola alone, and they need to be net zero energy if they want to have that claim. They need to be net zero water if they want to have that claim. They might need to be net zero carbon if they want to have that claim. And those are three very different things, besides whether they also want to gain, reputation for improving the health of homes, or what their clients, right? What do they consume, right? What do they recognize you for? And if you're helping someone's grandma live through the winter because her HVAC system was replaced, there's a lot of social connection there, right? A lot of heart and soul that is otherwise not connected and possible. But how do all the freshwater gallon players that need to offset fresh water, how do they all combine on one side? And how do projects, when they're ready to have the projects done, how does a random homeowner in one state or the other, when they're ready to do a project, how do they claim some of that money? So there's all of these different flavors of money that should be sort of standardized. And then there's all these projects that have bundles of line items that can prove any one type of funding was built correctly. And that's the mesh. That's the Wayfinder protocol, right?
Yeah.
I was going to ask a follow-up question, but I actually, looking at the remaining questions, I want to take one of the other ones and maybe expand upon it and give you guys a chance to get into some more details. One of the other open questions is, can you talk a little bit more about data privacy and data protection for items such as home appliances? Are there risks to the data being shared for individuals? And one of the things I'd like to add on to that, maybe, and you guys didn't really talk about, but when I think about, the data being collected from my home, you guys talked about like, forms and stuff like that, but I also think a lot about like IoT devices, right? And the types of data that my thermostat probably knows more about me than I even realized, and how those play into the environment as well. And then I have one more kind of more philosophical question, I guess I would describe it as, it's like, as people are able to monetize their data, right? Whether it's from my IoT device, whether it's from my home, how do you balance that with the continued need for, the privacy of the data and the things that you might be getting up? Because right now, when an advertiser asks me to opt in, it's very easy for me to say no, because I don't care about more targeted ads. But if somebody's offering me like real value in return, I'm going to be clicking yes a lot more and giving up my data a lot more. So there's like three different things in there, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on these.
Yeah, I'll start by saying it's somewhat terrifying, right? How much trust has to be perfected, right? SIRTAJ, you mentioned clicking yes. Like, if you're going to give me money, I'll click yes. Imagine clicking yes one time and 1,500 different deals got a piece of your data with one click. Right, and your data was broken apart so that only each player got one little tidbit. So there's some safety in this like atomic level of, you have a big data file and it, one little thing is zinging out, and that's its own very complicated bunch of middle companies that has to make that happen. It has to store a file. Like, in order for Coca-Cola to prove that they have 10,000 logos on HVAC systems, executive there needs to see a report where there was an old water heater and now there's a new water heater with an HVAC with a Coca-Cola logo on there. They need to see that 10,000 times, right? They shouldn't be able to see anything else. They shouldn't know anything else about your house. But in terms of what the minimums are for their due diligence to prove their money was spent correctly, vis-a-vis what the homeowner has to give up to get the $50 or whatever the dollar amount is, there's a legally binding deal. There is something that has to be there on every single one of those items. So privacy is key, and not 100% of it is still all figured out. This is where we are at the cusp of our data standard and bringing the sort of the environment up into some sort of real-time aspect at the moment to prove a couple of little things through it into a few regional grants, vis-a-vis having sort of massive online nationwide thing accessible at first. But privacy is what this whole thing was designed upon. And the thought, again, that we want as homeowners to be the ones to choose and to be the ones that get the bulk of the profit if you choose to participate the data into an ecosystem. This is you getting the lion's share and everyone else charging fees and surcharges to store it, transform it, and move it and edit it or whatever. Not a big giant data warehouse that figured it out about you and they own all of it and then they give fees and surcharges to other companies to do the same. This is the paradigm shift. And we're saying that your energy auditor, your quality control inspector that has credentials near you, they have enough on the line to maintain this privacy for you. They already use advanced privacy to make sure your data doesn't disappear or get abused when they're doing the regular program work. And the same with the utilities. They're very concerned about your energy meter data getting out and about. And by and large, we're actually talking about data odds and ends that is sort of superfluous or adjacent to the known energy efficiency sector. Again, because we're sort of focused on the non-energy benefit stuff. We want all these odds and ends to help pay for an efficiency project and more. And not just because it was more efficient, but because it was actually better, because you actually need it, or because you're monetizing your attention versus someone else monetizing your attention. And the attention economy is not something we have time to really debrief in full, but that's really the old data model is you're the product and you're not the asset. And that's a very different world to live in the next decade. I think we talked all around that question without answering it, but maybe ask it again or go to the next one.
No, I think you got it. That makes a lot of sense to me in terms of it. I think you said it best when you said that, hey, these are, we recognize these challenges, but it's something that we keep it. I'm paraphrasing you, but keep it at the forefront of your mind, and as you try to work on this, Yeah,
I can't describe it even in an hour-long call. There are some diagrams and videos that sort of help, some white papers, and it's actually fairly specific, sort of class by class. But at the end of the day, from the homeowner's perspective, we would expect it to end up in a very simple interface, and you choose a provider or choose an app or a bank or an aggregator or something where you'd have an account that was where you push the button, so to speak. And in the energy world today, you get an energy audit, you get a scope of work, someone runs a simulation, tells you what that scope of work's payback is. They run another report that says your local rebates bring your costs down, and so forth. And in the next world for Wayfinder, you might get a fourth report that says, hey, here are all your chapters. Everyone's familiar, with these online rebate sort of bazaars where thousands of companies will give you $5 to $50 to do stuff, right? But imagine a report where they've all lined up right in front of you and says, in chapter 1, we're willing, 30 companies want to give you this many dollars each for this type of one field worth of data, right? Or one ownership of one credit type. And you would have an interface to like dial up your duration or down your duration or turn off chapters, or if you want to go in line by line, select line by line. But that user interface is stuff we expect the detective space to develop. That's not on us. On us is to have mapped the data standard that made it standardized for what is being traded and swapped, legally speaking. Anyway, privacy is a big thing, and yeah.
No, we're a little bit over time, and really appreciate you guys coming on and talking about all of this stuff. If you have a little bit more time, there's I think one more question I'd really like to ask you guys. As much as I'd love to get into more of the technical details and things like that as well, but maybe more at a higher level. Early on, or you talked about the visions of what you guys are doing, and some there's a lot of focus on sustainability, and what I really think of as social good and positive social outcomes, right? So I have maybe two questions around that. One is what is your vision for trying to measuring positive social outcomes? We've talked a lot about specific finances of funding projects and things like that, but I'd love to hear from you guys about the vision of just how those positive social outcomes are realized, how you guys view those, and then as well, like how you kind of balance it with like incentives. I mean, like having Coca-Cola stickers everywhere and things like that. That's not really the social outcome I think you're looking for, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quickly. So we're going to do it in a couple different ways. Number one, we're going to leverage the prevailing thought leadership and application that's out there. For example, the social determinants of health framework is highly, highly proven and highly accurate as it relates to, in essence, positive social outcomes. Because when you talk about health, the built environment cannot be overlooked. And so we'll start with frameworks like that. We'll start with frameworks that relate to like aging in place. So there are current frameworks that leaders in various sectors, such as sustainability, public health, things that relate to poverty and economics, and we work with those within those frameworks. There are a few that we're developing on our own too, because intertwined with all this, and we never really talk about it, but there's a lot of psychological tools at play here in the consumer and being comfortable with sharing your data. So there's some things that we're developing as well that reflect positive social outcomes within a data-driven and a virtual type of space. Can't say too much about it right now because we're still co-creating it, but rest assured, we have to kind of measure that stuff. And there's some things that no one else is doing that we're going to be in the vanguard of doing. And then finally, and I'll add this, and then I'll pause and let Victoria or Jason jump in. Part of measuring outcome, to a certain degree, requires one to think about what the individuals out there who want to make a change want to see happen. So we talked a lot about the corporate lens, but they are not the only audience that we're talking to. And so we do have to balance like the reality of the consumer and what the corporate entity might think as being a required outcome. The logo alone is probably not going to be the only way we go about it in the future. It has to be things that affirm the humanity of people and not just treat them as cogs within a marketing set of machinery. But the other cool thing about it is that there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people with means, celebrities, athletes, private wealthy individuals that look for ways to make a difference. So if there's an Oprah out there or a Jay-Z or a Bill Gates that care about something in the home environment, but want to take $500,000 and maybe replace all the water heaters on the south side of Chicago in a certain neighborhood, Wayfinder makes that happen. If Drake wants to change something in Toronto, we can make it happen for him. If Vicente Fernandez
let me pick up on this. I mean,
wants to do something in La Purísima, Mexico, we can help make it happen. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, this is a great segue, James. Like, the Flint, Michigan water crisis was what it was, and you had celebrities tweeting out that they would be willing to help. But how many water filters got installed in homes versus how many cases of water did we actually truck up there and install nothing in homes? And this is a method where you can geo-target, or you can put up money into an escrow. You can just be the dude that has the money. Like, I only want the $1 million to go to certain FICOs and certain zip codes with certain pre-existing conditions in the house with certain, like, that's just the criteria. If you get projects that fit it, you do. If you don't, you don't. And this can happen, 10,000 times. And all of these can be, up there and made. And then projects on the other side of the equation can ping all the available rebates to see, well, does this one qualify for that rebate and that one and so forth. And then they get stacked up. And, I hate falling to the use case level. I do regret we even used any major, company names, but since we've blown Coca-Cola up, we might as well. This is really not about stickers, right? That's just one little idea of how to bring the cost of a water heater, replacement down. But I also said that Coca-Cola has net zero energy or net zero carbon, net zero water ambitions as an entity, right? And in the solar rec world, if a polluter needs to offset their pollution, you don't even know who is the entity that retires the RECs from you. You generate the RECs, you give them to a broker, the broker accumulates them and sells them to polluters, and the polluters take them and retire them. They don't even know they have your RECs. They just know they have valid RECs. So Coca-Cola is an important player because they have all of these elements, dimensions of offsets that they want to try to accomplish, and none of that has anything to do with stickers. But if there is a method where freshwater gallons were being metered, saved, like you're metering savings in other ways, or metering electrical generation and solar in other ways, then suddenly a bespoke certificate or a digital asset means that if they've accumulated them, they can show the world, hey, we got 1 million freshwater gallons, we retired them. They don't get to like put a sticker in your house for that. And so it's very, we use an example that kind of crosses both of these paradigms. But I'm kind of anti stickers and advertising in my house. You know, I'm also very anti my smart meter, my smart thermostat knowing my browsing history, which it does with the major big tech companies out there. I do not have a smart thermostat, and there's a reason for that. Not to say I won't get one, but I think that the human decision making and some of the very like construction, blue collar stuff that goes on in your house, there's so much there that can be valuable to big companies just knowing about it.
Well, and can I say something, Jason?
Go for it.
Because it's not just about big companies. SIRTAJ was asking about like the on the ground social impact. Think about every single home is in itself an ecosystem. And so the quality of your sleep has a huge impact on how productive you are, on your psychological state, on so many things. The quality of people's sleep increases or decreases the likelihood of domestic violence in a home. So all of these things, if you improve that environment in which humans live in a neighborhood that where the housing is not good at being a home, the housing is just shelter, but it's not actually investing in the health of the person or persons who are living in that space. So that's, for me, that's kind of the core, is that if we can individually improve the livability and the comfort and the health and safety of homes, we will make people healthier in general. People will become more productive. People will become less violent. There are so many outcomes from that.
It's the economy of scale, right, Victoria? It's the fact that you've got a portfolio of 10,000 railings that is now secure versus focusing on one client and you fix theirs and trying to measure whether that one person is going to have an impact or not. The economy of scale is what matters. You can collect a portfolio of very specific things, and then you've got statistical stuff. Then you've got value to prove out of it more than it would
systemic.
be.
Yeah, it's systemic and it's real world. I'll give you a very quick real world example. I'm based in Chicago, and I spent a number of years working in Humboldt Park in housing and some of the associated impacts around housing. And I'll just give you a quick summary. Humboldt Park used to be home to the third largest or second largest Puerto Rican diaspora community in the United States. And they did some studies there, and they found that Puerto Ricans within that particular neighborhood had higher occurrences of diabetes than Puerto Ricans in New York City, as well as those that are in the island. And they traced it to an issue in the built environment. Some of the homes within those Humboldt Park communities had atrocious air quality. There were several studies that were done by leading health professionals and architects and built environment professionals here in the Windy City, and they determined that the air quality within the homes within that neighborhood was far worse than the other poorly air quality type homes in the city. And so the point being is that Wayfinder makes it easy for interested stakeholders, whether you're philanthropic or corporate, for a nonprofit, to make a systemic impact and spend their money in a way that they can't really do right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. This has been a really, really fantastic discussion. Appreciate all the input, all of the detail. You know, we're way over time. If you guys have any closing thoughts, anything else you'd like to add, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, we'd love people to reach out to us, I think.
Yep, do that.
Reach out to us.
Find our pledge, you know, say that you care about your data, say you care about your neighbor's data, because if we care about each other's data, then we can own it as a society. You know, this this battle isn't yet won. I hate to say it, in terms of every homeowner being the sovereign owner of all of this data.
Yeah.
And we need your help. We need your support.
And so we say that, I think the term that we've been using to a certain degree to describe what we're doing with Wayfinder, I mean, we're co-creating this, not because it's fancy and in vogue, but it's a necessity. As you see, it's intersector, it's cross-issue, but it is systemic. And when you get to things at that level, you need co-creators. So our website is currently being revised with some things to make it easier to not only understand what we do, but also figure out where you fit in within the Wayfinder ecosystem. Whether you're the guy or gal that does the tech stuff, whether you're someone who's an influencer and knows how to connect people and resources, there's room for everyone to help co-create this thing that we're calling Wayfinder.
Hey, awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you guys so much. This has really been a great session, and hey, I'm excited to learn more. I'll definitely hope would love to stay in touch with you guys, and maybe even get into some more of these topics a little bit more at some point. So
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Yes.
all right. Thank you guys.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.